Hola Comadres, welcome to another episode of Comadreando podcast. I'm your host Marcy, and today we have an amazing guest, Jessica, and I will let her introduce herself. Who are you?
Hola Comadres, I'm Jessica Paulino Arnold. I am the founder and executive director of the EMA Project and also run an HR consulting business, JPA HR Solutions. But I'm here today during Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month to share a little bit about my birth story, share my sunshine with you, Edward Manuel Arnold, who passed at 22 days old, and to share what healing looks like within grief and how that shapes us, what tools we can acquire during that time to help us along, and to understand and accept that grief is a lifelong journey. It is not something that you just simply get over. It is something that you learn to live with.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Comadres, we have been trying to record this episode for a little while now. Something always happened that, either, conflicts in schedules or things like that, but I'm glad that we're finally able to record this episode. It is going to be a very powerful one. And with that being said, our topic today is birth justice and advocacy. And also we're going to be talking about grief and infant loss because it's something that happens in communities of color often, and it's not really discussed in depth. Okay. And the reason why the topic came up is that because of the fact that it is Infant Loss Awareness Month, I feel like it's something that we need to dig into. And we have talked about this topic on the podcast before. We've talked about birth stories and birth justice, but I feel like we need to continue to promote advocacy, especially when dealing with the medical field when it comes to birth and ourselves, like as autonomous beings. So let's get into the topic. You said that you run an HR consulting firm. So what made you get into that field?
HR kind of just happens for me, to be honest. It's something that I grew to love and became passionate about. I do have a daughter, Noemi, who's now 24 years old. Goodness, I don't know where the time has gone. But at the time I was raising her, someone recognized, a certain skill set that I had and really encouraged me to pursue it. So I've had a beautiful, global HR benefits career for 20 years now. And I am now transitioning out of that career to become a doula, to become a certified yoga teacher, to run the EMA project full time, because that's the purpose that I feel God has given me within this pain. And then it's also what has allowed me to shift my pain and sort of turn that into a purpose within my life that I'm really passionate about helping others, because I've lived through it, right? And I'm living through it every day. And I say I'm surviving it every day. But HR, I've traveled the world, been to places as far as Belgium. So for this little Dominican girl, was a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, to get to a certain place in my career, to be able to work for these global corporations and be able to travel and bring myself to it. Now, I think what has shifted for me in starting the EMA project is that I can really bring my whole self, my whole authentic self. That means all parts of me. And that is something that I never felt in my career, to be honest with you. As a person of color, a woman of color, who was oftentimes the only person of color in the room in companies that pushed, DEI, for those who don't know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It never felt that way to me being on the inside, right? So I have the unique opportunity to build a company that represents my values, that represents my mission, that represents me as a full-faceted individual. That includes spirituality, that includes God for me, that includes, prayer, meditation. And so I bring that with me now everywhere that I go, which is very freeing.
That's amazing. Oh, and then, sorry, comadres, I've been forgetting this part. So I usually tell the comadres how I met the people that I bring on the show. So Jessica and I connected via Brujas of Brooklyn, we have been doing these sadhanas, which are yoga practices, right? It's Kundalini yoga, and we do 40-day practices in which we're practicing a certain routine every day at 5:30 in the morning every day. And through these yoga practices, we've been able to heal ourselves and tap into parts of ourselves that we often neglect. Another thing I wanted to say is that has been intrinsic in my healing process, especially going through all the things that I have been through, the trauma that I have been through throughout my life. I feel like that was one of the tools that, besides therapy and, taking antidepressants, that was one of the things that I was able to really, really help myself and really take care of myself as a whole human being. So, the Brujas of Brooklyn have done so many wonderful things and have reached so many people. But another thing that they have done is connected Jessica and I in that way. We started talking via the WhatsApp headquarters for the sadhanas, and then after that, we just kept following each other and keeping in contact. And I believe you're Mami Chula as well. Are you part of the Mami Chula Social Club?
I haven't been,
Okay.
no, but I know that the Brujas have talked about them before. I haven't joined them just yet, but something to look into because it keeps coming up.
Yeah. So the reason why I thought you were is because you represent the spirit of Mami Chula. So that's why I asked.
Thank you. I received that.
So going back a little bit to what you were saying, you're saying you're becoming a certified doula now. So just for the comadres that haven't, or the compadres that haven't dealt with what a doula is, can we give like more or less like a definition? Like if we were to look for it in the dictionary,
Absolutely.
what is it?
So a doula is a trained companion. They, whether it's a male, female, however they identify, excuse me, woman. I'm trying not to use that F word. It's someone who can advocate, who can advise, and who can offer emotional and physical comfort to a birthing person before, during, and after the birth or loss of a child. So the main reason I am becoming a full spectrum doula, so that means someone that supports you during labor, prenatal, as well as postpartum. However, my desire and really my dream for the EMA project is to provide these services specifically to BIPOC birthing persons who are experiencing a loss. So there are times when a birthing person is told that their baby has died in utero. That often means that person now has, not often, most times it means that that person actually has to go through the birthing process knowing that their child is without life. So it's really important to me, after what I experienced as a woman of color, an educated woman, a woman who had access, right, to resources. I found myself a little lost within my prenatal journey. And then after the transition of my sunshine, it just became apparent that a lot of the services that are offered are not offered by people that look like us, and so they don't necessarily have the cultural competency that it takes to understand the many layers within our culture, within language, within education. And so really what I want to do is to be a safe haven for anyone experiencing grief. I am functioning as a grief coach now, supporting bereaved families, everything from stillbirth to congenital diseases that, ultimately a child passes from, and supporting those birthing persons who are feeling maybe stuck in their grief, who may feel like they can't survive this loss. I mean, it's a very real feeling. And I speak from experience that there were times, and I say this constantly to bereaved birthing persons, that I didn't think I was going to survive this. And every day I am surviving. It is unnatural to think of a parent losing a child. There is a word for a person who loses a spouse. They're a widower. There is a word, when you're motherless or fatherless, there is no word really for a person without a child. And when you have this birthing body that is now, it may be producing milk.
Mm-hmm.
You are definitely postpartum, right? You've gone through the birthing process. And so, what does that mean for your body and for healing? Depending on how many weeks you are, your state or your job may not recognize that as a viable life. And I mention that because sometimes that means that people cannot take a full 12 weeks of time off, or maybe are not being supported within the medical system to take that time off. So that's where I come in. That's where I come in as a doula. That's where I come in just as a person with lived experience. That's how I come in as a grief coach, and making sure that people make informed decisions about their birth and knowing that they do have options. If you're not feeling like you're being cared for by your current OB, it is time to switch. You can switch providers even in the middle of your pregnancy. It doesn't mean it doesn't come with challenges, but this is why it's important to surround yourself with people who know the system, who may have been there, may have experienced it, or have the experience of advocating for others. And every hospital has a healthcare advocate that you can ask for, but then that's also where doulas can come in. Some states cover doula coverage. I know New York is one of them. Massachusetts covers it for Mass Health patients. Those are Medicaid patients. And I'm currently working on with a group of people, amazing people, who are advancing legislature within Massachusetts to get doula reimbursement from insurance providers, to get coverage, everything from not just perinatal support, but how do we support those bereaved families? How do we support them with housing? How do we support them financially? A lot of birthing persons are unable to return to work. That's kind of how the EMA project was birthed for me, to be honest. That a year after, so at the 1 year anniversary of his birth, right before his 1 year anniversary of his death, because he lived 22 days. So he was born February 15th of 2020, and he passed away March 9th, 2020. In February of 2021, I decided that I needed something to help me along. I needed to provide support to people the same way that or in different ways, in how it's been provided to me in grief. And one organization that I'm super proud to be a board member of, and I started as a community member, is Propa City Community Outreach. Propa City Community Outreach is doing a lot of work in Massachusetts and Boston. It is in memory of Simeon Jelani and his wonderful mother, Stephanie Crawford, who's the founder, is the first person that really supported me. And I mean outside of family. I felt very supported by my family, by my friends, but they didn't necessarily understand what I was going through. They didn't understand this. I'm a person that that tends to be very positive, right? But there was no room for pretense in grief. This is what it is. It's like, when you can push yourself and you can just be like, oh, I'm just going to put a smile on and I'm going to push through. There was no room for that for me in grief. I was one of those people that was couch locked, is what I call it. I went from the bed to the couch for a long time, and you talk about the Brujas of Brooklyn and you see the smile, because I remember joining my first sadhana last year in August of 2021. And it was a dark period for me, still, like a year and a half into his transition. And I remember feeling so lost and feeling like, how am I going to make this organization work? How am I going to get funding? How am I going to live being able to provide these services? Because the reality is we all need money to live, right? And knowing that I had tried to return to corporate America, but it just wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't working in the way that, truthfully, the way that we are not seen in corporate America. And so I started both companies during COVID, both organizations. And what can I say that I haven't shared? I mean, grief has been, it's like I say sometimes, the waves of grief, it can be anything from a tsunami to like the calmest, most gentle wave, or none at all. And so grief for me is about, number one, is not linear. Number two, you know, a lot of people talk about the 7 stages of grief, and truly you can go back and forth between stages. You're not going to go in the same sequence as someone else. And so it's the waves. You got to ride the waves. And for me, it's been about knowing, or learning, really learning how to carry that weight of grief. The reality is my son is gone, right? Like, I can accept that, but there are still milestones that we grieve as parents, especially knowing what I'm missing out on, right? Like, I've raised a productive human being too already. So I know what I'm missing out on. You know, I know that I'm missing out on seeing him graduate college, if that's what he wanted, right? But of even like Halloween is around the corner, putting on a costume on my child, you know, those are all things that I would say the first year it was horrible. Everything and anything was a trigger. I think many people tried to support me and they didn't know how. And sometimes that led to things that are insensitive for bereaved parents. That we know it's coming out of love. We know it's coming from a place of you wanting to love on us and support us, but a life can't be replaced. And so I think that's what I want people who maybe have not experienced this, who may have to support someone who has, to know that we can accept that our child is gone and still mourn every milestone. And that is really normal to do so. But back to what I started saying with these sadhanas, is what I started to see within myself is this light and this power that I feel like I'm owning, like my whole self for the first time in my life. And there's such a negative connotation even to the word bruja, right? Like, especially in our community. And it's like, they are healers. They are, you know, women of God, who believe in our own power, who believe in the power of manifestation and prayer, who believe in meditation. And those are all things that I identify with. Kundalini yoga has been a really spiritual practice for me. I've experienced things while practicing. I'm sure you can relate that your mind is blown away. And also just being able to like see myself, accept where I need support, where I need help, like understanding that I don't have to live in a constant state of trauma or victimhood. I can reclaim that. I can reclaim my story. I can reclaim my heritage. I can reclaim like ancestral ways of being that we've been colonized and conditioned to think that, you know, we don't need. And part of that is asking for help. Asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. You have to be vulnerable enough to ask for help. And you see me on the chat sometimes. I'm like, guys, I am having a day. I need some words of affirmation if you have them. You know, like that to me is asking for help. Asking for help is also saying no. Is setting boundaries for yourself when you are depleted and you can't pour into anyone else because you need to pour into you. That's been the number one lesson. Grief has been a gift, even in this like sadness, because going back to the word of like just putting on or like just being ready or just showing up for people, I could only show up for myself. And so that also changed my circle. The people that I really, you know, sometimes I think it's an opportunity for you to see who is really there for you, because it's easy to show up to a party. It's easy to show up when there's a lot of light in your life, right? But how are you showing up for people in their darkness? How are you showing up for them, and how are you pouring into them? And so for me, it's been a realization of like, wow, the my circle right now, these are my people.
Yeah.
This is my village. This, I call it my griefy care team. But truly, because they didn't shy away from that darkness. They didn't shy away from me when I didn't even know what I needed myself. Some people just sat with me, some cried with me, some, would come and help me clean my house. Like
Yeah.
those things,
Mean
like
a lot.
I can't even tell you like how priceless that is for me.
Listen, I'm gonna touch on like a couple of things that you said. So there's a meme. I love memes. So there's a meme that a person is going through a stage of depression,
Mm-hmm.
and the friend comes in, and instead of being like, get up from there, whatever, the person is like, the person that is grieving or like going through the sadness is sitting on the floor with a blanket over their head. The person comes in and sits next to them and puts the blanket over their head too. Sometimes
Yeah.
all you need is somebody to be with you physically. Even I call that parallel play, because
Mm,
since I work with kids with on the spectrum, they
yeah.
engage in a lot of parallel play. So it's play that you're in the same room but you're not really engaging with each other. But sometimes all you need is the presence of that other person to make you feel better, right? One of my love languages is quality time, and I feel like that's quality time. If you have the friendship or the relationship that you can sit together in silence and not feel that you need to fill the void with words, that is a powerful relationship. The other thing
I
that I
felt
want
that. I felt that.
Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on is that I didn't know that there were death doulas. I actually follow one on Instagram, and I feel like the work that you're gonna be doing as a full spectrum doula is so powerful. A lot of the time, death is not really spoken about. In this culture, especially, it's kind of like it's really sick though. I want to say it's really sick the way that some people are expected to just kind of like move on and just forget about the person, and they don't take into account like that full all of the things that you go through when you experience a loss, especially and in our community too. Like I feel like a lot of the time, like people don't really take that into account because we've been traumatized and conditioned in a way, especially through colonization, that we're just expected to just go through these things and just keep moving and just keep going and going and going and going and not sitting and really analyzing your feelings and seeing how you're feeling at the moment. I shared this before on the podcast. I lost my dad when I was 11, and we never went to therapy. So
Mm.
those stages of grief, I definitely agree with the fact that you say that is not linear. There was days that I could talk about my dad, and I could talk about like little memories here and there, and it wouldn't affect me as bad. But like, it could be I was walking down the street and I saw, I don't know, his car, the car that he used to own, and that would like bring me to tears.
Mm.
Something as simple as that, and people don't talk about that enough. And the fact that we don't support people that are grieving as much is, it really like it shows lacking as a community in that sense. But I'm so happy that we're, as in our generation, we're putting in the work to heal and to help each other and to create that community and to create that village. That when you said that the village that you have now, that's your village, I felt that, because it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's people that are related to you. It can be other people that showed up when you didn't expect anybody to be there.
Oh, 100%. Oh, I felt that. I literally have chills all over my body. I didn't realize we had a shared history with that. I lost my dad as well when I was young. I actually didn't get to know. I didn't get to know him.
Mm-hmm.
I lost him when I was 2, and I'll say that I I couldn't agree more. Like reparenting ourselves to create these communities of love. Like we see it with these sadnas, right? We join these groups, and it's like, I was saying that to someone yesterday, that I said, you know, colonization wants us to believe we're on this island by ourselves, right? And that, or that, there's so much ill intent in this world, and so you shouldn't be open, and you shouldn't, all the things you shouldn't, right? But these sadhnas continue to teach me every single time with these communities, like, look at how beautiful we show up for complete strangers. That is how we show up for the people that we love. And so I refuse to think and to like subscribe to treating people outside of our families better than we do when we're home behind closed doors. I think that's something that culturally also happens. And so it's like, no, I'm going to treat everyone with this respect and this dignity, whether it's death or it's life. And I agree with you. I think that prior generations lived through this pain in silence, and sometimes they want us to continue that silence. And that's why we are cycle breakers in our families, in our communities, in our work. We are cycle breakers because we refuse to be silent. We do not have to suffer alone. You are not alone in your grief. You are not alone in thinking you may not survive grief. And that goes beyond the loss of a child, because grief is grief, and grief is love. Love doesn't die with that person.
Yeah.
Right? If anything, I feel like love is magnified.
It is.
Love is magnified in grief. And so what do we do to honor our people? That's something that, I thank my mother for showing me how to honor, because my father passed away 40 years ago, this July. I was 2 years old. And my mom has taught us how to care for him, how to care for his tomb, how to, I say I'm a child of the cemetery because I literally grew up like going to the cemetery all the time to care for him, for my grandparents. And keeping his memory alive. And that's something that I remind her, because I think what I've seen in my family, that it's like, oh, but he was just a baby. Like, you don't have that many memories.
Yeah.
That's exactly why it is so painful. I don't have that many memories. All the memories that I could have had, I won't have.
Yeah.
And so words are important. How we show up for people, it's important. But more so to just understand that we need community, we need collective healing, and different parts and different stages of your grief will call for different things. There is definitely a period that you go through of isolation. I went through it, and what I'm realizing more and more is like, when I isolate, that means I'm not well.
Yeah.
So how do I counteract that? What do I have now in my toolbox that I can pull out? What practice can I reach into? Who can I, reach out to and say, hey, I love using the word grieving. That, not a word, but a word for me. That it's like, I'm feeling extra griefy today. Like, can we go for a walk? I did that the other day. I reached out to a fellow lost mom who, we support like my lost community is like, it's been life-saving. It has been life-saving to see other women who have survived, to see other birthing persons who are surviving, who I can talk to a mom that lost her child 40 years ago, and she's hysterically crying like it happened yesterday. It makes me feel less alone. So, I urge anyone that is grieving, and not just grieving the loss of a child, but find a community within that grief. There are so many support groups, Facebook, virtual, and I'll name some organizations too that people can reach out to. But really, it's like, when my daughter, as an example of how grief shows up in life, and how it is not necessarily the loss of life that can trigger grief. My daughter went off to college. I was in my 30s, probably like, I want to say like 38. young mom. I had my daughter very young. And so it's always been the two of us. She decides to go to college her first year. She goes to Colorado.
Oh my God.
Ooh, the grief. Okay. Like, talk about bittersweet. I was elated that my daughter got to have a traditional college experience, got to choose where she wanted to go. I could send her, all of those things as a teenage parent. I didn't necessarily think I would be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like facing, oh, I'm by myself now in this home. It's always, the last 18 years,
Cha-cha.
it's been just the two of us. And what did I do? I went out and I found an empty nester group because I was like, I don't know what is happening. Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
I should just be happy. Why? Because we've been conditioned to think that those things cannot coexist. But
Mm-hmm.
guess what? I can be happy. I can be sad. I can be sorrowful and experience joy literally within the same minute.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I'm like the type of person, like, I can't shut that off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm feeling what I'm feeling and I need to feel it. And so I share that to say that you should, if you feel called, to look for a group that addresses that whatever kind of grief you're experiencing in your life, because they're out there, they are supportive. You can feel held by a community that understands what you're feeling, what you're going through. It doesn't mean that you're having the same experiences within that grief, but just to feel identified with someone that, like I said, when I reach for the phone and I contact one of my lost moms, I don't have to explain anything. They know.
Yeah.
They know. If I say I need a walk and they're able to do it, we show up for each other, and so, like I said, there's multiple virtual groups that you can join. Proper City Community Outreach, which is the organization that initially helped me, and that I am now a proud, there goes the accent, a proud board member of. They put on a beautiful, virtual group. It's a mama chat, and it's like, we grieve because they existed. We grieve because we love them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to have this group where sometimes we're crying, sometimes we're laughing, all in the span of that hour. And we're sharing our birth stories and we're sharing about, the things that we miss, and we don't feel like we can't. It's really powerful to be in a room with other beings that just understand what you're going through without words. And I, did I think I would be here 2 years ago, like when my son transitioned?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. I didn't know what it was. But I do think it's important. Like, self-care becomes such a big part of healing.
Speak on it.
Yeah, like, I mean, I say that in grief I became a yes person, actually, but also like my no's became stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And I say things to my Dominican mother, like, please accept my no, like you would a yes. There's no question when there's a yes, right? So if I say no, it should be accepted in the same way.
Yes.
Um,
That's powerful.
Self-care. Yeah. And it's, oh, girl, like, seriously, for me, it's like boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I cannot work from scarcity anymore. I cannot work from a place where I am depleted just so that I can pour into someone else.
No.
If I have to, so, that's very different than my corporate career and how I was running my life. And shout out to Noemi, to my daughter, because I remember having a conversation about the workplace with her, and her looking at me, and this is why this younger generation is even more powerful. She said, "You're perpetuating the things that happen in the workplace, Mom." And I was like, "What?" And I had to sit with that. I literally had to sit with that. Like, here's this 20-something-year-old woman telling me that I am perpetuating what's happening in the workplace. Let's talk about it. How am I doing that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that by not showing up authentically. I'm doing that when I don't speak up, or I feel like I cannot speak up because I might lose my job.
Yeah.
But now I see it as, if I lose my job, that is what needs to happen, because I'm not going to stand for discrimination. I'm not going to stand for anything against anyone of any color, religion, uh, even belief. Like, it's just, for me, it's become super important to advocate in every way. And um, most recently, I had a recruiter reach out to me, send out, what I do in HR is very specialized. And they reached out, and the first thing I do is I look at their video, that the little recruiting video they sent me. I go and I look at their board, and then I look at their leadership. Does anybody look like me?
Yeah.
No? Then I don't want it, because I know what's going to happen when I'm in those spaces. And so I think that we need to realize that we have power. That means not consuming products. I do my best. It doesn't mean listen, it doesn't mean I do this 100%, but it means that I'm more aware of it. So if a certain company supported a politician whose views I don't agree, yeah, now I look at those things and I try to avoid them. Um, it's important to, I'm voting for people, and I want to raise this because we have an election coming up,
Yeah.
November 8th, and like we have an election, and our local elections matter. Do these people support our rights over our body? If you don't, I cannot support you. How are you supporting marginalized communities? I am of a marginalized community, and I do not say the word minority, because we are not the minority. And so words are important. Changing our vocabulary is important. I try to use birthing persons whenever I can, because I do understand and know that not everyone identifies as a woman.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to add anything, but I can speak to, what has worked for me, and it truly, it's not a one size fits all. You have to find what works for you and grieve. I'm serious about scheduling my time, very serious. And so that means sometimes I don't have the space or the time. It doesn't mean that I don't have free time, but it means that that time is mine. So setting the boundaries of, like, saying no when you have time scheduled for yourself. So I love a bath, I love to hike, meditation, yoga, all of the things that I know that for me provide me grounding and healing. I just went to a training at the historic Highlander Center in Tennessee. And I'll be honest, I was a little upset. I didn't even know the rich history of the Highlander Center. Rosa Parks went there.
Wow.
Dr. Martin Luther King went there. All people who went to teach and to learn about popular education, about social justice, civil rights, how to advocate, how to show up for people. And this training, I thought I was going to learn how to facilitate, right? And social economic justice. And it was all that, but it was also very different. And so it's like, people or society and the conditioning that we've received makes us think that these spaces don't exist. Let me tell you, they do. I was perfectly held over 4 days in a training where I felt so whole, so seen, so heard, never felt uncomfortable, never felt like I didn't belong. A sense of belonging is very real for us, for people of color. And it was a training, and I facilitated training for the last 20 years of my life, and I walked away with a brand new toolbox of how to show up, how to facilitate, how to allow people to be seen and share their stories. There were days we ended with a group hug. I mean, these are not things that I have experienced in the corporate world.
Yeah.
People shared their grief. I shared my story about the EMA project, about how I got there. And there was someone in our group who shared about having a miscarriage 5 years ago and not being able to grieve because she was told that baby didn't exist. And so, again, we have to go back to our humanity. We have to go back to compassion. We have to return ourselves to support and community, and knowing that How people choose to grieve is an individual journey,
Mm-hmm.
and it is up to that individual. It's not up to us to dictate what that looks like.
So I want to talk about that you're talking about right now. Like, I remember through the grief process, we were expected to have certain kinds of behaviors because that is what people did in Dominican Republic. Like, you weren't allowed to dance, and you weren't allowed to listen to music, and you weren't allowed to do all these things. You couldn't wear a certain color. All those things, I feel like people do it because that is the expectation of society, not necessarily because that person doesn't feel like that. What if my father was a musical person and the way I want to
Mm-hmm.
grieve is to listen to his favorite albums? So you're going to tell a child, no, you can't express your grief that way because that is not what
Ooh,
is
oh, yeah.
that is not how we do things in our community. That is not how we do things in society. You know? So, a lot of these things, and then grief. Another thing I want to say about grief, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't just show up when somebody passes. I went through the
Mm-hmm.
grieving process when I got the diagnosis for my son. I know you listen to the show, and it's
Yes.
like it's adjusting your thinking to now a different reality than what you expected. And a lot of the moms that I have spoken to, that have been on my show, that are comadres, that I have spoken to outside of in the education community, have gone through the same experience, right? So this is where, us as cycle breakers, right, this is where we come in, creating that community and holding each other and holding space for each other, and like just being there for each other. It's so important,
Mm-hmm.
and it means so much. Like, I've had women reach out to me like, hey, can I talk to you? Sure. And what do we talk about? Stuff that they're going through with their children, things going on in school and things like that. And the thing is that, like you said, we don't have to go through this alone. This whole individualistic, lone wolf phenomenon from corporate, not corporate, but what is it, this capitalistic society that we live in, that's not how we as humans are supposed to be. So, the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that has been done by our generation is extremely powerful, because the thing is, the more that we unite and the more that we get together, the more our voices are heard, and that we're able to heal collectively, not just, one or two people, but, help create the type of society that we needed, like when we were little girls, to support us, going forward.
Absolutely. That was a whole sermon, by the way. Um, it really was. I am reminded of the examples of duelo, of grief
Yeah.
in my life. My maternal grandmother mourned from the time my mom was 16 until she passed, which was 17 years ago. So we're talking about she wore mourning colors for over 40 years. She never wore color. Okay. And to be clear, I mean, lavender is a color, which is a mourning color,
Mm-hmm.
but it was black, it was gray, it was like a light lilac,
Mm-hmm.
and it was white. Then my mother, who was grieving my father, my mom was 23 years old when my father was murdered. She was a baby with
Jesus
two
Christ.
babies. I was 2 years old. My sister was one. And the example, she wore mourning colors for 8 years. So here I come, right? And those are the examples I've had in my life. And my son dies. I am in a very dark place, but I am still wearing color.
Mm-hmm.
I am putting on my red lips when I feel called to, because that's what makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I am dancing and putting on music because it allows me to move my grief. Grief requires movement.
Yes.
I want to say that again. Grief requires movement. That energy is stuck in your body. That love is stuck in your body. So it is important to move. That is one of the self-care things that I do. Like when I am feeling extra down, I give myself the time that I need to like be in bed. But then I'm like, okay, how can you push yourself today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is not a walk I have ever regretted. Okay, there's not a hike I have ever regretted. And every time I do it, it just reinforces that because I feel good at the end of that
Yes.
walk or the end of that hike or the end of my yoga session. Sometimes I just put on a YouTube video
Mm-hmm.
of a yoga practice and I do it, and that helps me. But it's really about, I feel like this entire grief journey for me has been about reparenting myself around what grief looks like, how it shows up, how do I want to be, who do I want to be. I don't want to work for anyone else anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for me? How do I create what I need or what I feel is missing? But I want to be very clear that it took a while to get here. I don't want people to tune in and think, oh, like how,
Eso pasa de una vez, that's
how?
it. It takes
El
time.
tiempo. It takes time. And it's not that with time you forget.
No.
Is that with time you learn how to carry it.
Yep.
With time you learn to accept. With time you learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Who is your community care team? Let's use that word. Who do you have? Make a plan. When you're feeling well, that is the time to plan for when you're not.
Yes.
So like I write down, I have a friend for everything, let me tell you. Like there is someone that I know I can call and I can just be like, oh, this person's going to make me laugh. There's someone that I can call and I know they'll take a walk with me.
Mm-hmm.
There's, my sister has truly been like my best friend. Like, my sister and my mom have carried me in unimaginable ways in the last 2+ years.
Mm-hmm.
When I wasn't the kindest person, when I wasn't this light, you know what I mean? They have carried me. And for my community care team, it's like, all right, who can show up for me when and how do I show up for them? So that's also really important to me now. It's like when someone is going through something, I don't just assume what they need, I ask.
Yes.
And if you don't know, do you mind if I offer you some options and you tell me what you want to do? It's also trying to be aware that sometimes we emotionally dump on people and we should be asking them, do they have the space and do they have the time?
Yes, that's important.
I don't know that I always do it, but I tell you that I'm more self-aware now and that it is something that I'm working on. I also think it goes back to boundaries. So when someone is doing that to us, how do we say, I don't have the time and space right now? And a lot of us have a hard time hearing no.
Yeah.
But a no, it's okay because it means that person is honoring themselves.
Yes.
So that's how I have reparented.
Good. Sorry, I wanted to just chime in. The other day, somebody wanted to have a conversation about a topic that I did not have the bandwidth. I did not have the headspace for at that moment. And I did not feel guilty about telling that person. I don't have the bandwidth or the headspace to have that conversation in this moment right now. And the person was like, oh, no, but and I'm like, I understand, but also no. Like we're not doing that today. Because I don't have the mental capacity to go into that trip with you and dig up all this other stuff. I'm good. You know what I'm saying? But like it has taken so much work and so much practice to enforce boundaries and to be okay with that and not feel guilt. Because this is the thing, right?
That part.
We're practicing, we're learning all these beautiful tools, these different methods, right? But then like also reparenting ourselves and not feeling guilt for using those tools for ourselves,
right?
So it's just important, and I love everything that you said, and I want to like talk a little bit more about what exactly the
Hmm.
EMA project is doing. I know you're supporting
Absolutely.
grieving families, but like what is it? How can we help? Number one, and then what is it that you're
Yes.
doing for these parents?
I'm so glad you asked. These are the things you see the smile, but really because it brings me so much joy to be able to support people that are grieving. And, I feel like I've become this gatekeeper of grief and like this, just really this advocate of like, no, you grieve however you need to. Let's find healthy ways, right? What does healthy mean to you?
Mhm.
Not what it means to me. Not what I define as healthy for myself, but what is grief? What is healthy to you? I wanted to share some of the items that I actually include. So we have a care package that we send out when grieving families reach out to us, and we include some wonderful things in it. So I include just a blurb about how the EMA project was created, our card, and a handwritten note that I usually write myself, addressing their child by name, addressing their grief, making them what I hope to be, feel seen. There's different journals that I include as well as books. I'll share my favorite one. It's called Soul Affirmations. And if you've never heard of soul affirmations, I encourage you to look them up because this is by Dr. Felicia Gamglove Bailey, and I apologize if I butchered your name, but I'm trying. And her husband did the foreword, Kariga Bailey. And they are a couple that I found, and they have some affirmations that really helped me through grief. They had their first child was born stillborn. They were 30 something weeks into their pregnancy. Child died in utero and she had to deliver. This journal has really like allowed me to put my grief on paper. And it usually has a prompt. So I'll read this one just to share, but it
Mhm.
says, I'm grateful to be a mother, differently than I ever imagined, but not a deficiency in who I am. I am a mother.
Wow.
That is so powerful because if you do not have any living children and you are grieving the loss of a child and people ask you, are you a parent? It's a very complicated question to answer. Very complicated. And even for those of us who have living children, it is still, I say, what do I say? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm a mother of three. Sometimes I'm like, but I'm really a mother of five. And then when I think about it, I'm like, I'm really a mother of 15. The losses that we've experienced it's a multi-layered loss. It's loss of embryos, it's loss of pregnancy, and then the loss of our son. So all of that is important. I have books in Spanish as well for those that may not be fluent in English.
Mhm.
This one is Distintos tipos de dolor, la historia de Isaac. And this is from a child's perspective and a child experiencing depression and
Mhm.
naming your feelings and your emotions. So I personally feel this is particularly important in my community
Mhm.
for Spanish speakers because so often we are told to just get over depression.
Yep.
This is another journal that I also have included, and it's called Dear Mama, a memoir for you. And this is all poems, poems from a bereaved mother, that are bereaved from a bereaved mother's point of view. And then this is a grief and healing journal, and it's called Missing You. Again, I just try, and this is similar to the soul affirmations that it has a prompt and then it has a page for you to fill out.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'll read this one since I opened it up to this one. It says, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract your grief and heals them. And that's what I feel the EMA project is for me.
Mhm.
It's the love of healing. It's the love. This is another journal. It says spread the love. With this one, have our barcode, and sometimes I write in, if I'm not including the card, I write it in on the journal.
Mhm.
Just a special note to that family. And how can you support the EMA project? You can support by liking our page, by sharing our content, by donating. The biggest initiative that I have right now, I'm going to show you some of our little gowns that I went to the Dominican Republic to pick up. These are handmade, crocheted for tiny little babies. One of the thoughts that I had literally as my son was transitioning, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, right? But I remember thinking, wow, they don't even have something that fits him. So as my son is transitioning and I get this big baptismal gown that's a preemie size,
Mhm.
right? But my son wasn't a preemie. My son was a micro preemie. That means he was the size of a Barbie or a G.I. Joe. He was a pound and 10 ounces, 12 inches long. He was tiny. And so I had that thought in my heart at that time. And then this year, I was like, my cousin happened to post that she's crocheting. And I was like, you know what? How can I support her in her business? She's from La Vega
Hey,
in the
vegana.
Dominican Republic. Yes, cibaeña, típico all the way.
Yeah, I'm from La Vega too.
And oh yeah, yeah. With her, it was like it was so simple. I reached out, I told her what I had in mind. There was no pause. It was like, I got you. I got you. And so I went and I picked up a bunch of these outfits, which I'll be taking to Yale New Haven Children's Hospital. The first batch is going there. That is where my son transitioned
Mhm.
in New Haven, Connecticut. And it is, if you donate to our cause, the money that you donate is going directly to help bereaved families. It's going for the gowns and it's going for the care packages. So really the bulk of the work that I've just been doing on my own with no funding.
Mm.
Now I'm at the stage where I'm looking at grants and I'm looking at ways that we can be supported through our government, through our politicians. I'm part of, I don't know what to call it, but I'll say task force of people who, it's a program called Mind the Gap. And it's through the Postpartum Support International Association and the Massachusetts PPD Fund. Our senator elect Liz Miranda is someone who has been super supportive of us and also of supporting birthing people. And how do we get them access? How do we get these migrant families, to safety in a safe space to share?
Yes.
How do we, how do we legislate to make sure that our rights are protected? So right now I'm working on a legislative bill in Massachusetts. Senator-elect Liz Miranda already has passed doula coverage under Mass Health. But how do we get insurers to reimburse doulas for
Yes.
the work that they're doing? Because we need it. We need the advocacy. We need people who know the system. And so the whole point of this is to increase research, funding to improve awareness and access for pregnant and postpartum birthing persons and their families. How are we supporting them with housing? How are we supporting them with financial funds if they're in need? There's so many of us that go through losses and, like I mentioned, can't return to the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we support them? Because they need support. They need support at a basic level. So those are the ways in which you can support. I also have a bonfire.com fundraiser, and that's for our gear. So we have the EMA Project gear that you can wear. Please post and tag us, hashtag for EMA. And we love to show off, people who are supporting us. We showcase them on our website and on our social media. But it's really that it's send over the people that are hurting. That is support to me because it allows me to do what I feel is in my heart right now. The passion filled work that fills me, that heals me, that allows me to be seen and heard as well as providing that for someone else. And I've said this to my family often as they are not understanding sometimes of my work transition and career transition, that I've never felt more aligned with God and the purpose that He has in my life and in my heart than I do now. And so, out of this great loss, actually came so much healing. And so, I call Him my sunshine because I feel like His light is shining through me every single day. And that there were times when I couldn't even say His name, right? Because the grief was so,
Great.
so, so very heavy. And so I'm just thankful for the evolution of grief. I'm thankful for the love that I feel for him that is fueling this passion. And I would just want to share like my tagline for the EMA project, which is it was created with big dreams and tons of love in memory of my sunshine. And it's a safe container for your grief. It's a safe container to be heard and seen. I'm never going to tell you what to do or how to do it. It's more how to assist you with finding the things that will work for you that feel like you're coming home to yourself.
I love that. And with that, comadres, we're going to end the episode. I'm going to end it how I always do, which is follow me at Comadreando Pod on Instagram. And you can follow Jessica on Instagram at, can you drop your handle, please?
The EMA Project.
Okay. And if you have any questions at all for me or for Jessica, please feel free to send me a Comadre-Gram or slide up into my DMs. You can send me a Comadre-Gram at Marcy at comadreandopod.com. And thank you for spending time with your comadres. Remember, I will be dropping all the information about the EMA project in the show notes. Make sure that if you know anyone that needs support in that way, and it doesn't matter what kind of grief it is, send them on over to Jessica and she will make sure to take care of them. And remember to love each other and be kind to each other. And with that, I want to say good night. Bye, everyone. Do you have a minute for comadre time?